we are going to start looking at the principles of design. The elements of art create the principles of design. They can be unified within a composition. There can be contrast between the elements. One element can cause emphasis within a principle. There can be a variety of elements used. Repetitive use of an element can create rhythm. They can be used in a harmonious way or balanced. Balance is the concept of visual equilibrium and relates to our physical sense of balance. It is a bringing together of opposing forces in a composition that results in visual stability. Most successful compositions achieve balance in one of two ways: symmetrically or asymmetrically. Emphasis is also referred to as point of focus or interruption. It marks the locations in a composition which most strongly draw the viewer's attention. Usually there is a primary or main point of emphasis with perhaps secondary emphasis in other parts of the composition. Proportion refers to the relative size and scale of various elements in design. The issue in the relationship between objects or parts of a whole. Rhythm can be described as timed movement through space, an easy, connected path along which the eye follows a regular arrangement of motifs. The presence of rhythm creates predictability and order in a composition. Visual rhythm may be best understood by relating it to rhythm in sound. Rhythm depends largely upon the elements of pattern and movement to achieve its effects. The parallels between rhythms in sound or music are very exact to the idea of rhythm in a visual composition. The difference is that the timed beat is sensed by the eyes rather than the ears. Unity is the underlying principle that summarizes all of the principles and elements of design. It refers to the coherence of the whole, the sense that all of the parts are working together to achieve a common result, a harmony of all the parts. Balance is the concept of visual equilibrium and relates to our physical sense of balance. It is a bringing together of opposing forces in a composition that results in visual stability. Most successful compositions achieve balance in one of two ways: symmetrically or asymmetrically. Symmetrical balance can be described as having equal weight or equal sides of a centrally placed axis. It may also be referred to as formal balance. There is a variant in symmetrical balance called approximate symmetry, in which equivalent but not identical forms are arranged around the axis line. This axis may be horizontal or vertical. It is also possible to build formal balance by arranging elements equally around a central point, resulting in radial symmetry. When the elements are arranged equally on either side of a central axis, the result is bilateral symmetry. Asymmetrical balance, also called informal balance, is more complex and difficult to imagine. It involves placement of objects in a way that will allow objects of varying visual weight to balance one another around an axis point. This can be best imagined by envisioning a literal balance scale that can represent the visual weights that can be imagined in a two-dimensional composition. For example, it is possible to balance a heavy weight with a cluster of lighter weights on equal sides of an axis. In a picture, This might be a cluster of small objects balanced by a large object. Proportion refers to the relative size and scale of various elements in design. Anthropometrics is the systematic collection and correlation of measurements of the human body. Designs using the application thereof are called human engineering. This was pioneered by Henry Dreyfus. Ergonomics is the study of how people relate physically to their living environment. The study of how to make manufactured products physically user-friendly. The study of relationship between the human body and the total environment in which it lives. Ergonomic is designing the interface between humans and the designed objects, grips, seating, comfort, and optimal performance. Ergonomics is the scientific discipline concerned with designing according to the human needs, and the profession that applies theory, principles, data, and methods to design in order to optimize human well-being and overall system performance. The field is also called human engineering and human factors engineering. Our most universal standard of measurement is the human body, that is, our experience of living in our own bodies. We judge the appropriateness of size of objects by that measure. For example, a sofa in the form of a hand is startling because of the distortion of expected proportion and becomes the center of attention in a room. Architectural spaces intended to impress are usually scaled to a size that dwarfs the human viewer. This is a device often used in public spaces, such as churches and centers of government. The same principle is often applied to corporate spaces, through which the enterprise wishes to impress customers with its power and invincibility. In contrast, the proportions of a private home are usually more in scale with human measure, and as a result it appears friendlier, comfortable, and less intimidating. Use of appropriate scale in surface design is also important. For example, an overly large textile design can overwhelm the form of a garment or a piece of furniture. A surprising aspect of proportion is the way ideal proportions can vary for the human body itself. Styles change in bodies as they do in clothing. Prior to the 16th century, for example, the female body ideally had large hips and belly. Only later was a small waistline stressed. In the 17th century and many other periods, the ideal body was much heavier than we would accept today. Of course, in the last years, the ideal personified by the fashion model has fostered a standard which idealizes exceptionally slender body proportions for women. The golden ratio is a common mathematical ratio found in nature that can be used to create pleasing, natural-looking compositions in your design. We call it the golden ratio, although it's also known as the golden mean, the golden section, or the Greek letter pi. Based on the Fibonacci sequence, which you may remember from either your school mathematics lessons or Dan Brown's novel, The Da Vinci Code, the golden ratio describes the relationship between two proportions. Fibonacci numbers, like many elements found in nature, follow a 1 by 1.61 ratio. This is what we refer to as the golden ratio, and as it forms such a common sight in nature, it feels pleasing to the eye when we use this same ratio in our design work. Rhythm can be described as timed movement through space, an easy, connected path along which the eye follows a regular arrangement of motifs. The presence of rhythm creates predictability and order in a composition. Rhythm depends largely upon the elements of pattern and movement. Visual rhythm can be created in a number of ways. Linear rhythm refers to the characteristic flow of the individual line. Linear rhythm is not as dependent on pattern, but is more dependent on timed movement of the viewer's eye. Repetition involves the use of patterning to achieve timed movement and a visual beat. This repetition may be a clear repetition of elements in a composition, or it may be a more subtle kind of repetition that can be observed in the underlying structure of the image. Alternation is a specific instance of patterning in which a sequence of repeating motifs is represented in terms short, long, fat, thin, round or square, dark or light. Gradation employs a series of motifs patterned to relate to one another through a regular progression of steps. This may be a gradation of shape or color. Emphasis is also referred to as point of focus or interruption. It marks the locations in a composition which most strongly draw the viewer's attention. Usually there is a primary or main point of emphasis with perhaps secondary emphasis in other parts of the composition. The emphasis is usually an interruption in the fundamental pattern or movement of the viewer's eye through the composition, or a break in the rhythm. The artist or designer uses emphasis to call attention to something or to vary the composition in order to hold the viewer's interest by providing visual surprises. Emphasis can be achieved in a number of ways. Repetition creates emphasis by calling attention to the repeated element through sheer force of numbers. If a color is repeated across a map, the places where certain colors cluster will attract your attention. Contrast achieves emphasis by setting the point of emphasis apart from the rest of its background. Various kinds of contrasts are possible. The use of a neutral background isolates the point of emphasis. Contrast of color, texture, or shape will call attention to a specific point. Contrast of size or scale will as well. Placement in a strategic position will call attention to a particular element of design. Unity is the underlying principle that summarizes all of the principles and elements of design. It refers to the coherence of the whole, the sense that all of the parts are working together to achieve a common result, a harmony of all the parts. Unity can be achieved through the effective and consistent use of any of the elements, but pattern, that is underlying structure, is the most fundamental element for a strong sense of unity. Consistency of form and color are also powerful tools that can pull a composition together. However, unity also exists in variety. It is not necessary for all the elements to be identical in form, providing they have a common quality of meaning or style. Unity can also be a matter of concept. The elements and principles can be selected to support the intended function of the designed object. The purpose of the object unifies the design. The gestalt theory is an important theory that is applied within especially logo design. The gestalt theory plays a vital role in the way designers communicate. Gestalt is a psychology term which means unified whole. It refers to theories of visual perception developed by German psychologists in the 1920s. These theories attempt to describe how people tend to organize visual elements into groups or unified wholes when certain principles are applied. Proximity occurs when elements are placed close together. They tend to be perceived as a group. Similarity occurs when objects look similar to one another. People often perceive them as a group or pattern. Closure occurs when an object is incomplete or a space is not completely enclosed. If enough of the shape is indicated, people perceive the whole by filling in missing information. Continuation occurs when the eye is compelled to move through one object and continue to another object. Figure and ground is most prevalent as there is an equality or balance between foreground and background, and each of these causes the other to be more noticeable.